Hello again. When last I left you, I think we had just gotten done typing in the if statement. The first one, it's checking for null fields. And the next thing I want to talk about is what you do next. So that first if it's true, in other words, there is stuff in those text boxes, then we need to do the value of true, which happens to be another if. And that other if is going to be something called a DLOOKUP. The DLOOKUP is a function it's actually a domain lookup. So it goes off and looks in a table and finds things that you specify. The only odd thing about DLOOKUP is that it has some weird syntax if you're using strings, which is what we're doing here. So what I want to do is take a look at what's happening. This DLOOKUP has 3 arguments, and I am highlighting the quotes because every argument has its own set of quotes. And what we've got in the first argument is we're looking up the field password in table user. And it's going to meet a condition here that is also surrounded completely by double quotes. And so I'm going to turn these quotes blue so that you can easily distinguish that those are the ending quotes for the argument. As we go inside the argument, then we have username, which is a field name, equals. And then we get this weirdness going on with single and double quotes. Inside, in all of the red, that is a string. And so what we've done is we've concatenated double quotes around the contents of txt current user. And around that I have to put single quotes because those single quotes now demarcate what the condition is, or what that part of the condition is. So if the username equals and then the condition, this string, and the condition, and the argument, and if those two match up with the corresponding password, and if that matches the password there, then we're good to go. Okay, so that's what this DLOOKUP is saying. I'm going to go find the password in the user table for the person who entered their name into the txt current user. And I want to find the username and the corresponding password, and if that password matches txt password, then we're good to go. It's kind of a pain in the butt, and what I'm going to suggest is that if you type it, be careful. It's very easy to get a parse error, but really just copy and paste it from the instructions if you want to go that way. There's no harm in doing that. So we're back here in the if statement, and notice this is the if. It's going to be the value of true for the first if. So what we want to do then is add an action. So notice I'm clicking on the if, and that's going to give me a new action box underneath it. You don't want to go below the end if. So the very first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab the current user, so the txt current user box, and I'm going to set it to a variable. Okay, so that means that I can take the value there and hold on to it as I move through the database. I'm going to call this setTempVar. I'm going to call this variable C user. So capital C, capital U, SER. You can call it anything you want, but this is what I'm going to call mine. And then what I need to do is tell it what CUser is. And so in the expression box below, I'm going to type in the name of the control. And I need to do this before I close the form, so that's why this is happening. So just type in bracket txt current user, close bracket, and you don't need that inner equal sign. I'm just going to erase that. Okay, so that's going to be my global variable that I can carry with me. I know who it is no matter where I am. I can always use that variable anywhere, and we'll see how we can use that later. The next one is going to be the obvious one. Let's close that login form. We don't need it anymore. So I'm going to close form, and this is, or close window, sorry. And this is the command that will work no matter where you are. If you happen to be on a particular form, then that form will close. You don't have to specify which one it is. My last argument, or sorry, my last action for this if statement is going to be to open the main menu. So I'm going to go find open form eventually, and then I'm going to tell it to open the nav main menu. Just a little bit of background here on this dialog area and all these arguments. There's window mode, which I like to keep normal because it's annoying if you don't, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But the data mode is important. You have a choice. You can open information forms like customer information in add mode. That means the user only gets one blank record, and they can add to that blank record, and it stores it onto the table that it came from. They can also add a new record from there and continue, but they don't get to see other records. The edit mode means you can see everything and also change everything, and then read only is pretty obvious. You only can read stuff but not make any changes at all. And this is a good thing to kind of think about when you're setting forms to open, and let the users do only what they need to do, and so choose wisely. Okay. The window mode, there are 4 different options. Stick with normal and we'll change how it appears when we get into the form properties. If you choose dialog, which is a pop-up, that means you have to interact with that form until it's closed. That means you can't do anything else in the database until that form is closed, which is not good for a main menu. So I would avoid that at all costs. You don't need to worry about hidden and icon. Some people launch forms to do some actions with code, and that's not normally what we would do. Okay, so just to go through this really quickly, there's our main if that's going to check for null values. Okay, there's our value if true, and that contains 3 actions. But now what I need to do is give it an action for the first if, so I need to add an else. Okay, so what you're going to do once you do that, once you get through what I'm doing here, you're going to go down to that, you're going to go up to the first if and select it. And when you do, what you'll see at the bottom, at the end of, or below the first end if, right there, you're going to go, and here I am talking, there it is, and there it is. You don't want to be there, you want to go else. Sorry, my fault, we're still doing the inner if. I am narrating this after recording it, so I apologize. This one we're doing, this else for that inner if, is a message box that says if it's false, in other words, if you aren't who you say you are and your password doesn't match up with the username, we're going to give them a message, the username and password you entered is invalid. Contact your supervisor. And that's going to be our value if false for that inner if. I'm going to title that invalid login and turn off the beep. And then finally, back to what I was saying before, we still need to give a value if false. to the very first if. And so I'm going to go up and click on that. And move down all the way to the bottom is where you'll see the add else. Okay, and notice it's below that next end if. So I'm going to add the else. So if it's null, then what needs to happen is we need to give them a message box to tell them that they must enter a username and a password. So to repeat, that first if is checking to see if there are null values, or checking to see that there aren't null values. If there are, in other words, if isNull comes up true, then we put a message, you must enter a username and password. Click OK to exit. Okay, so that concludes the entire if statement for your login. And one of the things you have to pay attention to is that you are in the macro is tied to a form, and the form needs to be open and the macro needs to run from it. Okay, so we're going to go do that shortly. In the meantime, go ahead and check through, make sure everything is in order here. And then we will try to run it. So this is what I mean. If you try to run it without the form open, and if you run it independent of the form, then it can't find what it's looking for. Even if you open the form at this point and try to run it, you're going to get an error just like the one you just saw. So go ahead here and you can open the form and you can add some users in there. And what I want to say is I'd like you to do this for all your databases. Add usernames that we will know. So for this one, I'm just going to go simple. I'm going to say user, user, user. And I'm just going to use that for my user privilege level. And then I want to do admin, 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 and allow admin to reset the password. Alright, so I'm going through here in design view of the login form. Sorry, I skipped ahead there. And what I want to do is add a button because I absolutely must run this from the form. So this is going kind of quick. What we want you to do is use a button that runs MCR login and call the button login. And now we can actually run the macro. If you left it in step mode, you may see things go by. If you leave it like we left it, which is in normal mode, you're going to see the result. And in this result, our very first if statement worked. It detected a blank and said you must enter a username and a password. Now we're going to enter the password and click login, and I'm getting an error. And at this point, and this will happen, you just have to suck it up and go find out what's wrong with it. And it may be just a weird space, or you mixed up the quotes. It's just odd. So go back to your macro and check it out, and then make sure and save it. So I'm going in here and I'm making sure that everything matches in the table, and I'm going to click login, and look, it works. It's awesome.